The wagon sat motionless in the clearing, its canvas torn and flapping in the autumn wind, and when Owen Yates dismounted his horse to investigate, the silence hit him like a fist. No driver, no horses, nothing but the creaking wood and two tiny bundles wrapped in blood-stained blankets that shouldn't have been breathing but were. Owen had been tracking elk through the Colorado Rockies for 3 days, expecting to find game, not orphaned infants. He was 32 years old, a solitary man who preferred the company of mountains to people, and had lived alone in his cabin for the better part of a decade. The year was 1876, and out here in the wilderness, a man could disappear into the landscape and forget civilization existed at all. But these babies, twins by the look of them, maybe 6 months old, they changed everything in an instant. He approached the wagon carefully, his rifle ready in case this was some kind of trap. Bandits sometimes used elaborate schemes to ambush travelers, though what they'd want with him he couldn't imagine. He had little worth stealing except his horse, his guns, and his solitude. The wagon itself bore signs of violence. Bullet holes peppered the wooden sides and dark stains marked the ground beneath. Whatever had happened here, it had been brutal and recent, perhaps within the last day or two. The babies lay in a makeshift cradle fashioned from a crate, wrapped in blankets that had once been fine quality. One was crying weakly, the other silent and pale. Owen had no experience with children, had never even held a baby before, but instinct drove him forward. He reached down with rough, calloused hands and lifted the crying infant first. A boy, he realized, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed far too aware for something so small and helpless. The second baby, a girl, barely stirred when he touched her. Her breathing was shallow, her skin cool to the touch. Owen's heart, which he'd thought had grown hard and indifferent over years of isolation, suddenly hammered with fear. These children would die if he didn't act, and act quickly. He searched the wagon thoroughly, finding supplies that suggested a family had been traveling: clothes, provisions, a small locked chest he didn't have time to force open. There were no bodies, which struck him as odd. Perhaps whoever had attacked had taken them, or perhaps the parents had fled and been unable to return. Either way, these babies were alone now, and the temperature would drop below freezing once the sun set. Owen made a decision that would alter the course of his life forever. He gathered the twins, the blankets, what supplies he could carry, and began the hard journey back to his cabin. It was a full day's ride, but he pushed his horse harder than he ever had, the babies wrapped inside his coat to keep them warm. The boy cried intermittently, but the girl remained frighteningly still. By the time he reached his cabin, twilight had painted the sky purple and gold. His home was a solid structure he'd built himself from pine logs, set in a valley with a clear stream running nearby. It was modest but weatherproof, with a good fireplace and a root cellar stocked for winter. He'd never imagined sharing it with anyone, let alone 2 infants who depended entirely on him for survival. The first night was a nightmare. Owen knew nothing about caring for babies. He warmed goat's milk from his small herd and tried to get the children to drink it from a clean rag, the way he'd once seen a ranch hand feed an orphaned calf. The boy took to it eventually, sucking desperately, but the girl remained unresponsive. Owen stayed up all night, holding her close to the fire, talking to her in a low, steady voice, telling her stories about the mountains and the stars and how she needed to fight, needed to live. Just before dawn, she opened her eyes and let out a thin, weak cry. Relief flooded through Owen with such intensity that his hands shook. He managed to get her to take a little milk, and though it wasn't much, it was enough to give him hope. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of exhaustion. Owen learned by necessity and trial and error. He fashioned diapers from old shirts, kept the fire burning constantly, and made trip after trip to his goats for milk. He talked to the twins constantly, narrating everything he did, perhaps because the silence of having them there but not hearing adult voices made him uneasy, or perhaps because some instinct told him they needed to hear a human voice. He named them after a week, once he was reasonably sure they'd survive. The boy became Thomas, strong and sturdy with lungs that could wake Owen from the deepest sleep. The girl he named Sarah, delicate but determined with a will to live that impressed him more each day. He had no legal right to name them, knew that somewhere these children might have family, but he also knew that out here, survival mattered more than paperwork. Winter came early and hard that year. Snow buried the cabin up to the windows, and Owen was grateful for his habit of over-preparing. He had enough supplies to last months if necessary. The twins grew stronger, developing personalities that delighted and terrified him in equal measure. Thomas was bold and loud, always wanting attention. Sarah was quieter but observant, her eyes following Owen everywhere he moved. Owen fashioned a sled to pull them around in, lined with furs to keep them warm. He took them to check his trap lines, talking to them about animal tracks and weather signs. He sang to them at night, old songs his mother had taught him before she died, songs he hadn't thought of in 20 years. The cabin that had been silent for so long now rang with laughter and crying and the strange music of new life. The months passed. Winter gave way to spring, and the twins learned to sit up, then to crawl. Owen Baby proofed his cabin as best he could, moving anything dangerous out of reach, and spending his evenings watching them explore their small world with wonder and determination. He realized he loved them, these children who'd come to him by chance and tragedy. They were his now, in every way that mattered. By the time summer arrived, Thomas and Sarah were walking, stumbling around the cabin and the cleared area outside with increasing confidence. Owen had become expert at anticipating their needs, reading their moods, keeping them safe and happy. He told himself this was enough, that they could live like this forever, isolated from a world that had nothing good to offer anyway. But in late July, everything changed. Owen had taken the twins down to the stream to play in the shallow water when his dog, a mixed breed named Bear, started barking furiously. Owen's hand went to his rifle instinctively, and he called the twins to him. They came without question, having learned early that when Owen used that tone, they obeyed immediately. A rider appeared through the trees and Owen's breath caught. It was a woman, riding alone, which was unusual enough. But more than that, she rode with purpose and skill, her posture straight despite obvious exhaustion. She was young, perhaps mid-20s, with dark hair pulled back severely and clothes dusty from hard travel. She stopped when she saw Owen and the children, her hand moving to the rifle on her saddle but not drawing it. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other across the clearing. "I'm looking for 2 children," she said finally, her voice hoarse. "Twins, a boy and a girl." They'd be about a year old now. Owen's world tilted. He'd known this moment might come, had dreaded it, but had also half convinced himself it never would. The wilderness was vast, and the chances of anyone tracking the twins to him had seemed impossibly small. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice flat. "My name is Jane Parker," she said. "Those children are my niece and nephew. Their parents were my sister and her husband. I've been searching for them for 11 months. Owen felt Thomas grab his leg, the boy's small hands gripping tight. Sarah had her thumb in her mouth, watching the stranger with wide eyes. His children. They were his children now. But even as the thought formed, he knew it was complicated, knew that this woman's claim might be stronger than his. "Get down," he said finally. "Slowly. Keep your hands where I can see them." Jane dismounted with care, moving like every muscle in her body ached. Up close, Owen could see the toll her search had taken. Her face was thin, burned by sun and wind, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion and grief that went bone deep. But those eyes also held fierce determination and intelligence that warned him not to underestimate her. "How did you find us?" Owen asked. "I didn't give up," Jane said simply. "I traced the wagon train, talked to everyone who might have seen what happened. Found the wagon eventually, saw signs someone had been there. Tracked you, though you're good at covering your trail. Took me months to piece together enough to know where to look." "Tell me what happened," Owen said. "To the parents." Jane's face went pale, then flushed with anger and pain. "Raiders. They attacked the wagon train just outside of La Junta. Most people survived because they scattered, but my sister and her husband tried to protect the twins. They were killed. The raiders took what they wanted and left. By the time the survivors regrouped and I got word, 3 weeks had passed. I came as fast as I could, but the trail was cold. The wagon had been abandoned. The twins were gone. Everyone assumed they'd been taken too or died, but I couldn't accept that. I had to know." Owen watched her carefully, looking for deception, but saw only raw honesty. "Why were you not with them?" "I was in Denver," Jane said, her voice breaking slightly. "I'd gone ahead to arrange housing, to find work so I could help support them. They were supposed to arrive 2 weeks after me. Instead, I got word they were dead." She paused, visibly steadying herself. "Please, those children are all I have left of my sister. Are they the ones you found?" Owen didn't answer directly. "The babies I found were half dead from cold and hunger. They would have died if I hadn't taken them in. I've cared for them for 11 months, fed them, kept them warm, taught them. They're healthy and happy." "Thank God," Jane whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Thank God you found them. Can I see them?" Owen hesitated, every protective instinct screaming at him to refuse to send her away to keep his family intact. But he saw the desperate hope in her eyes, the love and grief and longing, and he couldn't deny her. "Thomas, Sarah," he said quietly. "Come here." The twins approached cautiously, staying close to Owen. Jane knelt slowly, making herself less threatening, and looked at them with such naked love and joy that Owen felt something in his chest constrict. "You look just like your mother," Jane said to Sarah, her voice barely a whisper. "She had those same eyes. And Thomas, you have your father's chin." She looked up at Owen. "How did you know their names?" "I didn't," Owen admitted. "I named them myself, didn't know what else to call them." Jane absorbed this, blinking back fresh tears. "Their parents named them Michael and Elizabeth, but they've been Thomas and Sarah for most of their lives. Perhaps that's who they are now." The afternoon wore on. Owen invited Jane into the cabin, watching her carefully as she took in his home. It was clean and well organized, if sparse. The twins had a corner with their bedrolls, and the few toys Owen had carved for them. Everything spoke of a man doing his best to care for children in difficult circumstances. Jane's tension visibly eased as she observed how the twins interacted with Owen. They clearly adored him, running to him for comfort, laughing at his jokes, obeying his gentle commands. He was patient and attentive, anticipating their needs before they fussed. Whatever she'd feared about their treatment, it was obvious they'd been loved. "You've done an amazing job," Jane said finally, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you. You saved their lives." "No thanks needed," Owen said gruffly. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Jane said firmly. "They wouldn't have. Most men would have taken them to the nearest town and left them at a church or orphanage. You kept them. You've been their father." The word hit Owen hard. Father. Yes, that's exactly what he'd become, and the thought of losing them now felt like having his heart torn out. "What do you want?" he asked bluntly. "Why did you come here?" Jane met his eyes steadily. "I came to find my sister's children, to take them somewhere safe, to raise them as family. That was my plan." She paused. "But I can see they already have that here. They have you. And I need to think about what's truly best for them, not just what I want." "Stay," Owen heard himself say, the word out before he could think better of it. "Stay for a while. Get to know them. They should know their aunt, know about their parents, and you're exhausted. You need to rest." Jane looked surprised, then grateful. "Are you sure? I don't want to impose." "You've ridden alone for months searching for them," Owen said. "You're not an imposition, you're family." So Jane stayed. Owen set up a separate sleeping area for her, using blankets to create privacy. That first evening was awkward, both adults uncertain how to navigate this strange new arrangement. But the twins, with the adaptability of young children, accepted Jane's presence quickly, especially when she produced small gifts from her saddlebags: a carved wooden horse for Thomas, a rag doll for Sarah. "I brought these from Denver," Jane explained. "I've been carrying them all this time, hoping I'd find them." Over the next few days, a routine developed. Jane helped with the children, cooking and cleaning, insisting on contributing since Owen had already done so much. Owen found himself watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, noticing things: how she sang softly while washing clothes in the stream, how she laughed when Thomas did something clever, how gentle she was when Sarah fell and scraped her knee. Jane, for her part, was studying Owen just as carefully. She saw a man who'd chosen solitude but had risen magnificently to the challenge of fatherhood. He was patient and kind with the twins, but also firm when needed. He was intelligent and resourceful, his cabin and land testament to his skills. And despite his rough appearance and gruff manner, there was a gentleness in him that drew her. One evening, after the twins were asleep, they sat by the fire drinking coffee. The silence between them had become comfortable rather than awkward. "Why do you live out here alone?" Jane asked quietly. "If you don't mind me asking." Owen was quiet for a long moment. "I came west after the war," he said finally. "Saw things in that war that made me not want to be around people anymore. Found this valley, built my cabin, figured I'd live out my days alone. It suited me." "The war was terrible," Jane agreed. "We lost many people, my father and brother both." "I'm sorry," Owen said, and meant it. "This life you built," Jane said, gesturing to the cabin. "It's good, peaceful. I can see why you chose it, but weren't you lonely?" "Yes," Owen admitted. "But lonely felt safer than the alternative." He paused. "Until the twins came, they changed everything. Suddenly the silence wasn't peaceful anymore, it was just empty. They filled spaces in me I didn't know were hollow." Jane nodded slowly. "I understand that. After my sister died, I felt like part of me had been cut away. Finding the twins, knowing they are alive and well, it's like getting a piece of her back." "Tell me about her," Owen said. "The twins should know about their parents." So Jane told him. She spoke of growing up in Ohio, of her older sister Margaret, who'd been her best friend and protector. Margaret had married Robert Parker, a kind man who'd wanted to build a better life out west. Jane had planned to follow them, to help them establish their homestead, to be part of their children's lives. "Margaret would have loved what you've done," Jane said, wiping her eyes. "She would have been so grateful that someone like you found them, someone who actually cared." The days stretched into weeks. Jane proved herself invaluable. She was an excellent cook, knew how to preserve food, mend clothes, and handle countless tasks that had challenged Owen. More than that, she was good company. They talked easily now, sharing stories and opinions, discovering surprising common ground despite their different backgrounds. The twins adored having both adults in their lives. Thomas started calling Jane Janie with childish affection, and Sarah would cuddle up to her in the evenings, asking for stories. But they still ran to Owen first when frightened or hurt, still called for him in the night. The bonds formed over those first crucial months remained strong. Owen found his feelings toward Jane shifting in ways that unsettled him. He caught himself admiring the curve of her neck when she bent over her sewing, the sound of her laughter, the intelligence in her eyes when they debated something. He hadn't felt attracted to a woman in years, had convinced himself he was past such things. But Jane awakened something in him that was both thrilling and terrifying. Jane was experiencing her own confusion. She'd come here with a clear mission: find the twins and take them to safety. But now she was living in a mountain cabin with a man who intrigued her more each day, and the twins were so clearly happy here. The thought of taking them away from Owen, of breaking up this makeshift family, made her chest ache. But staying meant what exactly? Living here indefinitely. And what did Owen want? The question came to a head one evening in August. The twins were asleep, and Owen and Jane were sitting outside, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "I should probably be making plans to leave soon," Jane said quietly, though the words felt wrong even as she spoke them. Owen's jaw tightened. "If that's what you want." "It's not about what I want," Jane said. "It's about what's right. The twins need stability. They need a proper home, education, opportunities." "They have a home," Owen said, his voice rough. "They have love and safety. What more do they need?" "I don't know," Jane admitted. "I'm not criticizing what you've built here, Owen. You've done something remarkable, but I'm their aunt. I have a responsibility to them." "And what about what they want?" Owen challenged. "They're happy here, you've seen that." "They're babies," Jane said. "They don't understand what they might be missing. And you think taking them to some town, putting them in a house, that would be better?" Owen's voice rose slightly. "Towns are full of disease and danger. Out here, they're safe." "Out here, they're isolated," Jane countered. "They'll never know anyone but you, never have friends, never learn to read and write properly. Never." "I can teach them to read and write," Owen interrupted. "I'm not uneducated, Jane. I read, I think. Just because I choose to live away from people doesn't make me ignorant." "I never said that," Jane said, frustrated. "I'm trying to think about their future." "Then think about this," Owen said intensely. "They love you, you love them, I love them. We're good together, the four of us. Why tear that apart?" Jane stared at him. "What are you saying?" Owen took a breath, seeming to gather courage. "I'm saying stay. Not as a temporary guest, but permanently. Help me raise them, be their aunt, their mother, whatever they need. Be part of this family." "Owen," Jane said slowly, "that's a huge thing to ask. You barely know me, I barely know you." "I know enough," Owen said firmly. "I know you're brave and determined. I know you love the twins enough to spend a year tracking them across dangerous territory. I know you're good and kind and smart. I know that when you laugh, it's the best sound I've ever heard. And I know that the thought of you leaving makes me feel like I'm being torn in half." Jane's heart was pounding. "You're saying you have feelings for me?" "Yes," Owen said simply. "I didn't mean to, didn't plan it. But yes, I care about you, Jane, more than I've cared about anyone in a very long time." Jane stood up, pacing, trying to process this revelation. She'd felt the tension building between them, but had told herself she was imagining it, that Owen saw her merely as a helpful addition to his household. Knowing he felt more changed everything. "I have feelings for you too," she admitted quietly. "But Owen, this is complicated. We can't make decisions based solely on emotions. The twins have to come first." "They are first," Owen insisted. "That's exactly my point. They're thriving here, you've seen it. Why uproot them when they're happy and safe? Because what if something happens to you?" Jane said, voicing the fear that had been growing in her mind. You live a dangerous life. You hunt, you work with your hands, accidents happen. If you died, what would happen to them? They'd be alone again. If you were here, they wouldn't be alone, Owen said. They'd have you. I can't run this place by myself, Jane said practically. I'm capable, but I'm not a mountain man. I don't have your skills. Then I'll teach you, Owen said. I'll teach you everything I know, how to hunt, how to trap, how to survive. You're smart and capable. You'd learn fast. Jane shook her head, overwhelmed. This is too much. I need time to think. Owen nodded, visibly restraining himself. Take all the time you need, but know this: I want you here. Not just for the twins, though God knows they need you, but for me. I want you here for me. Jane retreated to her sleeping area, her mind spinning. She'd spent months imagining finding the twins, but she'd never imagined this: a ready-made family, a man who stirred her heart, a home in the wilderness. It was everything and nothing like what she'd planned. She thought about her life before. She'd been working as a seamstress in Denver, saving money, trying to build something stable so she could provide for the twins once she found them. It had been lonely and difficult work, living in a boarding house with thin walls and thinner soup. She'd been doing it because it was her duty, her responsibility. But had she been happy? No. She'd been surviving, nothing more. Here in Owen's cabin, she'd laughed more in a few weeks than she had in the entire previous year. She'd woken up each morning looking forward to the day, to teaching the twins new words, to cooking meals with food they'd grown or hunted themselves, to evening conversations by the fire. She'd felt purposeful and content in ways she'd forgotten were possible. And Owen. She let herself think about him honestly for the first time. He was handsome in a rugged way, with kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled at the twins. He was strong but gentle, capable but humble. He made her feel safe and challenged in equal measure. When he looked at her, she felt seen in a way she never had before. The thought of leaving him, of never seeing him again, created a hollow ache in her chest. But was that enough? Was emotion enough to base a life decision on? Over the next few days, Jane watched Owen with new awareness. She saw how he interacted with the twins, patient when Thomas threw a tantrum, gentle when Sarah was frightened of a thunderstorm, proud when they accomplished something new. She saw how he maintained his property with constant vigilance and care. She saw how he treated her with respect and consideration, never pushing despite his confession. She also observed her own feelings. When Owen returned from checking his trap lines, her heart lifted. When he smiled at something she said, warmth spread through her. When their hands accidentally touched while washing dishes, electricity sparked between them. This wasn't infatuation or desperation. This was real, deep attraction, and the foundation of something that could be love. The decision crystallized one morning when Sarah fell and cut her hand on a rock. Both Owen and Jane rushed to her simultaneously, and they worked together seamlessly, Owen cleaning the wound while Jane comforted and distracted her. Owen bandaging while Jane praised Sarah's bravery. Afterward, when Sarah was playing again with only a small bandage to show for her adventure, Owen and Jane looked at each other and smiled. "We make a good team," Owen said quietly. "Yes," Jane agreed. "We do." That evening, after the twins were in bed, Jane found Owen outside watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. "I have an answer to your question," she said without preamble. Owen turned to face her, his expression carefully neutral, though she could see tension in every line of his body. "All right. I'll stay," Jane said. "Not just for the twins, though they need both of us, but for me, because I want to be here with you, with all of you." The relief and joy that flooded Owen's face was beautiful to see. He stepped toward her, then hesitated. Jane, I need you to be sure. This life is hard. Winters are brutal. We're isolated. You'd be giving up any chance of an easier life in town." "I'm sure," Jane said firmly. "I've thought about it from every angle. This is what I want. You're what I want." Owen closed the distance between them and cupped her face gently in his rough hands. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," Jane whispered. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, both of them learning the shape and feel of each other. Then it deepened, becoming more urgent as months of building tension found release. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I love you," Owen said, the words sounding rusty but sincere. "I don't say that lightly. But I love you, Jane." "I love you too," Jane replied, the truth of it ringing through her. "I think I have for a while now. I was just too scared to admit it." They talked long into the night, making plans for their future. They would need to make the arrangement legal and proper. Owen suggested they ride to La Junta, the nearest town of any size, to be married by a proper minister, and to file paperwork making Jane's guardianship of the twins official alongside his own. "We should tell the twins the truth when they are older," Jane said. "About their parents, about what happened. They deserve to know." "Agreed," Owen said. "We'll honor their parents' memory, but we'll also make it clear that they're loved and wanted." The trip to La Junta took planning. It was a 3-day ride with small children, and they'd need to bring supplies and camp along the way. Owen had avoided towns for years, but he recognized the necessity. Besides, with Jane by his side, the prospect seemed less daunting. They set out on a clear September morning, the twins secured in saddlebags that Owen had modified to safely carry them. Thomas found the journey thrilling, pointing at everything and babbling excitedly. Sarah was more cautious but seemed to enjoy the adventure once she realized they were all together. They camped the first 2 nights, Owen teaching Jane wilderness skills while the twins slept. He showed her how to read the land, find water, spot animal signs. She was an eager student, asking intelligent questions and practicing until she got things right. "You're a natural," Owen said, impressed by how quickly she learned to build a proper fire. "I had a good teacher," Jane replied, smiling at him in the firelight. They reached La Junta on the 3rd day. The town was larger than Owen remembered, grown prosperous from the railroad and cattle trade. People stared at the unusual party, a rough mountain man, a respectable-looking woman, and 2 toddlers, but no one bothered them. They found a church first, and the minister, a kind older man named Reverend Walsh, agreed to marry them that very afternoon. He asked few questions, accepting Owen's brief explanation that Jane was his intended and they were raising her niece and nephew together. The ceremony was simple, held in the small church with only Reverend Walsh and his wife as witnesses. Jane wore her best dress, and Owen had cleaned up as best he could, shaving and putting on his only good shirt. Thomas and Sarah sat on the front pew, Sarah sucking her thumb and Thomas swinging his legs, when Reverend Walsh pronounced them husband and wife. Owen kissed Jane with gentle reverence, sealing promises that went far beyond the traditional vows. They were pledging to build a life together, to raise the twins, to face whatever challenges came as a united front. After the ceremony, they went to the land office. The clerk was less accommodating, skeptical of their story about finding abandoned twins. But Jane produced papers. She'd been carrying documents proving her relationship to Margaret, death certificates for the twins' parents that she'd obtained in Denver. Combined with Owen's testimony about finding the children and caring for them, it was enough to establish their claim. The clerk filed the paperwork making Owen and Jane joint guardians of Thomas and Sarah. It was an adoption, not formally, but it was as close as they could get without more extensive legal proceedings. You'll want to register them for school when they're old enough, the clerk said. There's a school being built here. Should be finished by next year. Owen and Jane exchanged glances. We'll teach them at home, Owen said firmly. We're too far out to make regular trips to town, the clerk shrugged. Your choice, but they'll need to know their letters and numbers eventually. We'll make sure they do, Jane assured him. They spent one night in La Junta's boarding house, a luxury after days of camping. The room was small but clean, and they put the twins to bed in a makeshift crib before sitting together by the window, looking out at the town lights. Are you happy? Owen asked quietly. Very, Jane said, leaning against him. Are you? Happier than I ever thought I'd be, Owen admitted. You've changed my life, Jane, you and the twins. I was just existing before, now I'm living. They consummated their marriage that night, coming together with tenderness and passion that left them both breathless and satisfied. Afterward, they lay tangled together, talking softly about their hopes for the future. I want to expand the garden, Jane said. Plant more vegetables, maybe some herbs, and I'd like to get chickens if possible. Fresh eggs would be wonderful. We can do that, Owen agreed. There's a farmer outside of town who raises chickens. We can stop there on the way back, see if he'll sell us a rooster and some hens. What do you want? Jane asked. What are your hopes? Owen was quiet for a moment. I want to build a better cabin. Bigger, with separate rooms for the twins as they grow. I want to teach them everything I know about living off the land, about being self-sufficient. And I want more children, if you're willing. Brothers and sisters for Thomas and Sarah. Jane smiled. I'm willing. I'd like that very much. The journey back to the cabin felt different than the journey out. They were returning as a married couple, as a legitimate family. Owen found he didn't dread the isolation quite so much anymore. With Jane to share it, the mountains felt less like a hiding place and more like a home. True to their word, they stopped at the farm outside La Junta and purchased chickens along with supplies for building a coop. The farmer's wife, a friendly woman, gave Jane advice about raising poultry and sent them off with well wishes. The twins were tired and cranky by the time they reached the cabin, but they brightened at being back in familiar surroundings. Owen and Jane worked together to unpack and settle everyone in, their movements synchronized from weeks of cohabitation. That night, in their shared bed, Owen pulled Jane close and whispered, "Welcome home, Mrs. Yates." Jane smiled into the darkness. "It's good to be home." The seasons turned, and their life together found a rhythm. Owen taught Jane to shoot, to track, to dress game. She proved herself an able student, though she never quite developed his ease with wilderness living. In turn, she taught him to read more advanced material, shared her knowledge of herbs and medicine, improved his cooking beyond the basics he'd mastered. The twins grew rapidly, developing distinct personalities. Thomas was bold and adventurous, always testing boundaries and seeking excitement. Sarah was thoughtful and careful, with a keen intelligence that showed in her observations. Both children were bilingual by necessity, learning to speak to Owen and Jane interchangeably, and developing a secret twin language of their own. Winter came again, and this time Owen wasn't alone in the isolated cabin. Jane's presence transformed the long, dark months from something to be endured into something to be enjoyed. They played games with the twins, told stories, sang songs. They made love while the children slept, finding increasing pleasure and comfort in each other's bodies. By spring, Jane was pregnant. The realization came with joy, and some anxiety. Childbirth was dangerous, especially in the wilderness, far from doctors or midwives. But Jane was healthy and strong, and Owen's determination to keep her safe was absolute. "We'll manage," Jane said confidently when Owen expressed worry. "Women have been having babies for thousands of years. I'll be fine." Owen wasn't entirely convinced but trusted Jane's calm certainty. He spent the summer gathering supplies, reading every book on childbirth he could acquire on trips to town, preparing for every possible complication. The twins, now approaching their third birthday, were excited about the prospect of a baby sibling. Sarah would pat Jane's growing belly and talk to it, telling elaborate stories. Thomas wanted to know when the baby would be big enough to play with him. "Not for a while," Owen explained patiently. "Babies are very small and helpless at first. You and Sarah were two. I had to take care of you." "Did Mama Jane take care of us too?" Thomas asked. They'd started calling Jane Mama Jane naturally without prompting. "No, you came before she did," Owen said. "But she loves you just as much as if she'd been here from the beginning." "Where did we come from?" Sarah asked, her sharp mind always seeking information. Owen and Jane exchanged glances. They'd agreed to be honest with the twins when they asked questions, but to wait until they were older for the full story. "You came from your first Mama and Papa," Jane explained gently. "But they couldn't take care of you anymore, so God brought you to Papa, Owen, and then I came to help take care of you too." "Where are our first Mama and Papa?" Thomas pressed. "They're in heaven," Owen said simply, "but they loved you very much, and we love you very much too." The twins seemed to accept this explanation, running off to play. But Owen knew the questions would come again, more detailed as the children grew older. They'd tell the truth when the time was right. Jane's pregnancy progressed smoothly through summer and into autumn. Her belly grew round and full, and she glowed with health despite the physical challenges. Owen was attentive to her every need, fetching water, taking over heavy chores, massaging her aching back. "You're going to spoil me," Jane laughed one evening as Owen insisted on washing the dishes while she rested. "That's the idea," Owen replied, smiling at her. "The baby came on a cold November night, arriving faster than expected." Owen had planned to have weeks to prepare, but Jane went into labor suddenly, waking him in the middle of the night with gasps of pain. Owen's military training and years of dealing with wilderness emergencies kicked in. He sent Thomas and Sarah to sleep in the loft, boiled water, gathered clean cloths, and stayed by Jane's side as she labored through the night. It was hard and painful, and there were moments when Owen feared they'd made a terrible mistake living so far from help. But Jane was strong, and when dawn broke, their son entered the world with a lusty cry that announced his displeasure at the cold air. Owen cut the cord with shaking hands, cleaned the baby, and placed him on Jane's chest. She was exhausted and pale, but her smile was radiant. "He's perfect," she whispered. "You're perfect," Owen corrected, kissing her forehead. "You did amazing." They named the baby Oliver, and he was indeed perfect, healthy, and strong, with a shock of dark hair in his mother's eyes. Thomas and Sarah were delighted with their new brother. Though Thomas was disappointed Oliver couldn't play immediately, Jane recovered quickly, her strength and vitality reasserting itself within days. She nursed Oliver while managing the household and helping with the twins, seemingly tireless. Owen was in awe of her, loving her more each day. The years that followed were full and rich. They expanded the cabin as planned, adding 2 small bedrooms and a larger main room. Owen's carpentry skills, learned through necessity, were put to good use. Jane's garden flourished, providing vegetables they preserved for winter. The chickens thrived, giving them eggs and occasional meat. The twins grew into bright, capable children. Owen taught them to ride, to shoot, to read the forest. Jane taught them letters and numbers, reading and writing, basic arithmetic. They were isolated from other children, but they didn't seem to mind, having each other and Oliver to play with. On their 4th birthday, Owen and Jane decided it was time to tell them the full truth. They sat the twins down and explained carefully about the wagon, the attack, the deaths of their birth parents. The children listened with wide eyes, processing information that was both terrible and distant. "You saved us," Sarah said to Owen finally. "I found you," Owen corrected. "But yes, I took care of you. And now we're a family," Thomas added. "Always," Jane assured them. "You're ours and we're yours. Nothing will change that." The conversation went better than expected. The twins asked questions over the following weeks, integrating this knowledge into their understanding of themselves. But it didn't change their relationship with Owen and Jane, who were simply Papa and Mama Jane, the only parents they really remembered. More children followed. 2 years after Oliver came Rebecca, a quiet baby with Jane's dark hair and Owen's steady gaze. Then, 3 years later, twin boys they named Samuel and Simon, who seemed determined to be as much trouble as possible from the moment they drew breath. The cabin expanded again to accommodate the growing family. What had started as a mountain man's solitary retreat became a bustling household full of noise and laughter. Owen, who'd once craved silence, found he couldn't imagine life without the chaos. Jane thrived as a mother to 5 children, though she admitted the twins' boys were testing even her considerable patience. Owen helped whenever he could, but much of the daily childcare fell to Jane and increasingly to Thomas and Sarah, who were old enough to be real helpers. The older twins showed different inclinations as they grew. Thomas loved being outdoors, following Owen on hunting trips as soon as he was old enough, learning to track and trap with single-minded focus. Sarah preferred books and learning, devouring every scrap of written material they could acquire and begging for more. "She needs more than we can teach her," Jane said to Owen one evening when Sarah was 8. "She's so bright, Owen. She could do amazing things with proper education." Owen knew Jane was right, but the thought of sending Sarah away to school made his chest tight. "She's too young to leave home." "Not now," Jane agreed. "But in a few years maybe we should consider it. There are boarding schools, good ones, that would nurture her mind." "We'll think about it," Owen conceded. "When she's older." But Sarah herself solved the problem. She was content learning at home, particularly when a traveling preacher and his wife stopped at the cabin one winter and spent 3 months snowbound with them. The preacher's wife was an educated woman who took delight in teaching Sarah Latin, advanced mathematics, literature, and history. By the time they left in spring, Sarah had learned enough to continue studying independently with the books they left behind. Thomas continued to follow in Owen's footsteps, becoming an accomplished outdoorsman by the time he was 10. But he also showed a gentle side, particularly with his younger siblings. He was patient with Oliver's endless questions, protective of Rebecca's sensitive nature, and tolerant of the twin boys' mischief. The family made trips to La Junta once or twice a year for supplies and to maintain some connection with civilization. The town had grown considerably, and people there knew the Yates family as the unusual mountain clan who appeared periodically with their well-behaved children and bought supplies with cash from Owen's furs and Jane's preserved goods. On one such trip, when Thomas and Sarah were 12, they encountered a man who recognized the twins. "I knew your parents," he said, approaching Owen and Jane carefully. "Robert and Margaret Parker. I was on that wagon train." Jane's breath caught. They'd never met anyone who'd actually known her sister and brother-in-law during their final days. "Tell us," she said. "Please, anything you remember." The man, whose name was Harold Gibson, told them stories of the journey west. Margaret had been kind and cheerful despite the hardships, always helping others. Robert had been strong and optimistic, looking forward to their new life. They talked constantly about their babies, about the future they were building. They died protecting the twins, Harold said. Robert threw himself over the wagon trying to shield them. Margaret fought like a wildcat. They were brave people. Good people. Thomas and Sarah listened intently, learning about the parents they'd never known. It was painful but important, connecting them to their origins. "Thank you," Jane said, her eyes wet with tears. "Thank you for telling us." That night in the boarding house, the family talked late into the evening about Margaret and Robert, about bravery and sacrifice and love. Owen held Jane while she cried for the sister she still missed. The children asked questions, trying to understand death and loss and the randomness of violence. "They gave us the greatest gift," Owen said finally. "They gave us you too. And while I wish they could have lived, while I wish they could have known the amazing people you're becoming, I'm grateful every day that you came into our lives." "You think they'd approve?" Sarah asked quietly. "Of us being raised here in the mountains so differently than they planned?" "I think they'd be grateful you were loved and safe," Jane said firmly. "I think they'd look at you both smart, capable, good-hearted, and be proud." The years continued to pass, marked by growth and change. Thomas and Sarah became teenagers, navigating that awkward transition with varying degrees of success. Thomas grew tall and broad-shouldered like Owen, while Sarah remained petite but developed a quiet strength that commanded respect. Oliver showed signs of being a natural scholar like Sarah, though his interests ran more toward science and nature than literature. Rebecca was artistic, constantly drawing and painting with makeshift materials. The twin boys, Samuel and Simon, were inseparable troublemakers who kept everyone on their toes. Owen aged gracefully, his hair graying but his strength still formidable. Jane remained beautiful to him, though she laughed at his compliments, pointing out the lines on her face and the silver in her hair. "You're more beautiful now than the day I met you," Owen insisted. "You've given me everything I never knew I needed." Their love had deepened over the years, weathering challenges and celebrations alike. They'd survived harsh winters, illness, accidents, and the constant demands of raising a large family in isolation. Through it all, they'd remained partners and lovers, their bond strengthened by shared experience. When Thomas and Sarah turned 16, they faced important decisions about their futures. Thomas wanted to stay in the mountains, to build his own cabin nearby and live the life Owen had taught him. Sarah wanted to attend college, to study and learn and see the world beyond their valley. "You should both follow your hearts," Owen told them. "We'll support whatever you choose." Sarah eventually went to Denver to attend a women's college, funded by years of saving and by selling some of Owen's furs. It was hard watching her leave, but Owen and Jane knew it was right. She visited during summers and holidays, bringing books and stories and enthusiasm that enriched the whole family. Thomas built his cabin a mile from Owen's, close enough for help if needed but far enough for independence. He took a wife at 20, a young woman from La Junta who was willing to embrace mountain life. They had children of their own, and the valley that had once held only Owen's solitary cabin became a small family compound. Oliver, Rebecca, and the twins grew up with the security of knowing they were loved and wanted. They each found their own paths, Oliver becoming a veterinarian, Rebecca a teacher, Samuel and Simon partners in a freight business that took them across Colorado. Owen and Jane aged together, their children grown and scattered but still connected. They'd been together for over 30 years when Owen fell ill one winter. It started as a cough that wouldn't clear, and despite Jane's nursing and the doctor they summoned from La Junta, Owen grew weaker. "I'm not afraid," Owen told Jane one night lying in their bed. "I've had a good life, better than I deserved." "Don't talk like that," Jane said fiercely. "You're going to be fine." but they both knew the truth. Owen rallied briefly in spring, but by summer he was bedridden. All the children came home: Thomas from his nearby cabin, Sarah from Denver where she was teaching, the others from their various lives. They gathered around Owen, telling stories and sharing memories. "Take care of each other," Owen told them. "Remember that family is everything." He died on a warm August evening, surrounded by Jane and their children. His last words were to Jane. "Thank you," he whispered, "for finding me, for loving me, for this life." "I love you," Jane replied through her tears. "I'll always love you." They buried Owen on a hill overlooking the valley he'd loved, with a simple stone marking his grave. Jane mourned deeply but carried on, as she knew Owen would have wanted. She lived another 15 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren, holding the family together through her strength and love. Thomas and Sarah, those twins Owen had found abandoned so many years ago, became the anchors of the family. They told their own children the story of how Papa Owen had saved them, how Mama Jane had found them, how love and determination had created something beautiful from tragedy. When Jane finally passed away peacefully in her sleep at 73, they buried her next to Owen. At the funeral, Sarah spoke about the aunt who'd become a mother, who'd given up an easier life to raise children in the wilderness. "She taught us that family isn't just blood," Sarah said. "It's choice, it's commitment, it's love that persists despite everything." She and Papa Owen gave us that gift, and we pass it on to our children. The cabin remained in the family, passed down through generations. It was expanded and modernized over the years, but the original structure Owen built remained, a testament to one man's determination to create something lasting. The story of Owen and Jane became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. How a mountain man had found abandoned twins and raised them with love. How an aunt had searched tirelessly and found not just her niece and nephew, but a home and a husband. How two people from different worlds had built a life together in the Colorado wilderness, creating a family that endured long after they were gone. Thomas and Sarah, in their old age, would sit with their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them about the wagon, the mountain man, the aunt who came searching. They'd explain how love and determination could overcome tragedy, how family could be built from the most unlikely circumstances. "We were blessed," Sarah would say. "We lost our birth parents too young to remember them. But we gained parents who chose us, who loved us fiercely, who built a life around us. Not everyone gets that kind of love. Tell us about Papa Owen," the children would beg. And Thomas and Sarah would describe the gruff mountain man who'd been gentle with babies, the solitary hunter who'd opened his heart and home, the man who'd built a legacy of love in the wilderness. "And Mama Jane?" the children would ask. "She was brave and strong," Sarah would say. "She crossed dangerous territory alone to find us. She gave up everything she knew to stay with us. She loved Papa Owen with her whole heart and gave him children of his own. She taught us that love means sacrifice and commitment." The valley where Owen had once lived alone eventually held 3 generations of his descendants. The stream he'd fished still ran clear. The mountains he'd loved still stood eternal. And the love he and Jane had built together echoed through the years, a testament to what could be created when two people chose each other and chose love. On warm summer evenings, when the whole family gathered for reunions, they'd sit around the fire pit outside the old cabin and share stories. The tale of Owen and Jane was always the favorite: how they'd met, how they'd fallen in love, how they'd raised 6 children in the wilderness and created something that endured. "It's a love story," one of the great-grandchildren said once. "Yes," Thomas agreed, old now but still with that adventurous spark in his eyes. The best kind, the kind that's real and true and lasting. The kind that saves lives, Sarah added, her scholar's mind still sharp. Papa Owen saved our lives when he found us. Mama Jane saved his when she stayed. They saved each other. As the years continued to pass, the family remained strong. They faced challenges and celebrations, losses and victories. But through it all, they held to the lessons Owen and Jane had taught that family was everything, that love required commitment, that the wilderness could be tamed not by domination, but by respect and understanding. The story of the mountain man and the woman who came searching became more than just family history. It became a reminder of what mattered most. Not wealth or status or conventional success, but love, loyalty, and the family you build together. And somewhere in the mountains of Colorado, where the wind still whispers through the pines, and the streams still run cold and clear, the legacy of Owen Yates and Jane Parker lives on in the descendants who carry their names, in the values they passed down, in the love story that began with two abandoned twins and became something eternal.